Hello everyone, Loremaster of SoTech here, and it's finally here. There is a new article coming out today, as you may have noticed, about sieges in Total War Warhammer. That's right! The Siege Rework beta is on its way to Steam. So, we're going to be going our way through this article, and I'm basically just going to talk about what's in here, and then I'll talk about my thoughts on what they are bringing to the game. So it says, "Hi folks, the gates of the Proving Ground are ready to be thrown open again, this time with the Siege Rework beta. Our goal here in simple terms is to make sieges more fun, and you are an invaluable part of making that happen through the Proving Grounds. We want to make sure we're making valuable, meaningful changes to the game, and your feedback is crucial to us achieving this. We won't roll out any changes to the base game until we're totally happy with the response from you, the players. This round of testing will last for 2 weeks, starting on the 24th of July until the 8th of August. All the info you need to access the beta and provide your feedback will be available in a dedicated subforum once the beta goes live on the 24th. Finally, we're excited to announce that on Thursday, the 17th of July at 3:30 p.m. BST, we'll be hosting a live stream on the Total War Twitch channel where we'll be joined by Battle Team Lead Milko Vasilev to explore the changes included in this beta in more detail. With that said, I'll pass the mic over to Milcho himself, and we'll see what they're up to. So, okay, this is actually pretty exciting. This means, as we can see, that the Sophia team, I believe, is going to be showcasing what they've done to the game tomorrow. So I guess I will also be live streaming at that time to watch it. But we have the Siege Rework with Mr. Vasilev, the battle team lead. So let's see what we've got. Removal of pocket ladder. Death to ladders. Death to ladders. It's finally here. It's finally happening. Removal of pocket ladders. What we've changed. The biggest change that we will be focusing on the most in this update is the removal of the so-called pocket ladders, which everybody technically likes to call ass ladders, but I guess they didn't want to say that, which allowed most infantry units to pull a siege ladder out of nothing, or their ass, and climb the walls of a settlement. In the Proving Ground, that is not going to be the case, and players, and the AI of course, will need to rely on different tactics to overcome the defenses of a well-fortified settlement. Why we changed it. There are 2 main reasons why we want to introduce this fundamental change to how sieges work in the game. Gameplay and immersion. Total War always strives to depict battles in a realistic way, and yes, in our world, dragons and giant flaming heads are counted as realistic. All projectiles are physically simulated, shields are providing protection only from the front, types of hit reactions are based on a relation between the impact force, which is different than damage, of the attacker and the mass of the defender. Even though it is not perfect and there are many more aspects that can be improved upon, we believe that the ability to pull a huge ladder out of your ass, nothing, can be quite immersion breaking for the players and takes away from the more strategic planning of the battle. In addition, this makes walls almost obsolete and allows enemies to bypass them with ease while making defending the choke points inside the settlement the obvious choice. This is not how we want sieges to feel. How will these changes affect you in-game? These changes will make your strategic decisions much more important and have you plan your approach or defense of a siege more carefully. And if you don't like them and prefer to get to the slaughter faster, you can always turn the pocket ladders back on in the options menu. Just make sure you do that before you actually get in the battle. Okay, so here we see that the pocket ladders are going to be optional. You'll be able to turn them on or off. I will say that I think personally, I'm going to be on the team that's advocating that they should really just go away. I would be interested in siege ladders perhaps returning as a piece of siege equipment that you can actually build, similar to battering rams or siege towers. I really don't think pocket ladders have a place in the game. The only thing I could see that would be even remotely similar is I could see maybe a trait being introduced in the game that allows units to be quote-unquote climbers, giving certain units the ability to climb the walls without needing a ladder. So maybe certain kinds of units like chameleon skinks, gutter runners, pretty much clandestine units, stealth infantry focus groups that are designed for like, you know, that would realistically have some method of climbing walls reliably. Could be a really, really fun way to address that. But, you know, I wouldn't want them to still use pocket ladders. I'd want them to just climb the wall with their, you know, with like their hands or their claws and stuff, which, I mean, that would require its own changes. So that may be too much work, but I would rather just nobody's able to climb walls with ladders than the pocket ladders if I had to pick between the two, because they're really, really silly and they just look really dumb. And they're not like themed for the various factions. Like it's just a really horrible piece of code or a system that has survived from the days of Warhammer 1 that really is long overdue for going away. Siege equipment rebalance. What we changed and why we changed it. The removal of the pocket ladders requires a ton of other changes to make sure the game functions without them. The siege equipment availability has been rebalanced and players will now be able to field more siege towers and battering rams in siege battles to compensate for the lack of ladders. Stats like speed and durability of that equipment has also been changed to make them more effective at their intended functions. In addition, we are changing the way siege attrition works and turning it into a linear progression, making it be stronger and stronger with each consecutive turn a settlement remains under siege. How will these affect you in game? Players will now need less manpower to construct siege equipment, which means it will be more readily available when sieging settlements. On the other hand, settlements are going to be a tad less susceptible to siege attrition in the early stages of the siege, while taking less overall turns to fully succumb to it. All right, so that one's interesting. I like the idea that they're rebalancing the equipment. Battering rams, I think, need to be a bit quicker. And siege towers, as I'm curious what exactly they've done to them overall, because it's going to be a tricky balance, right? Like you're going to need siege towers now to get infantry onto the walls, so they need to be able to move decently quick so that they can get to the walls and have good survivability. But at the same time, the defenders need to have viable ways to destroy them. So if you're a defender and you're playing your cards right, you should absolutely have the ability to shatter battering rams, blow up siege towers as they're approaching. You know, that's a big reason why I don't think they're going to do it in this one, though. We'll see as we get through it. But I'm really, really hoping to see more opportunities for different kinds of units to like get onto walls, notably like siege weapons and stuff. That way I can be firing cannons and other types of artillery at siege towers and battering rams, trying to destroy them before they get to the walls, making siege equipment matter significantly when I am defending in a siege. It's going to be interesting to see how they're going to overall balance this, because on one hand, yeah, it's just a difficult middle ground to strike. I know when I look at battering rams, the biggest thing I've always wanted, right now, they actually are very, very good at smashing through gates. Like if you're willing to wait for a battering ram to attack a gate, I think it kills it in like 3 hits, like breaks through. But the big issue, of course, is that the battering ram is very, very, very slow. And with the idea now that butt ladders will be gone, so units can't just swarm up the walls, getting a battering ram through the gate is going to be one of the relatively few methods that you as the player will have, or the attacker, to get into a settlement. Which means that the battering rams need to probably be a little quicker. That way the battle's able to like fully begin at a reasonable pace, because it's still a choke point. So, but once again, at the same time, it needs to be counterable. You know, the units that are pushing the battering rams need to be vulnerable to being shot at without being so slow that they just get absolutely eviscerated. I've always been kind of the opinion that I think it'd be nice for the units on the battering ram to receive like a small but noticeable missile resistance bonus, like 10 to 20% extra missile resistance, to represent them, you know, basically taking cover underneath the battering ram itself. which of course is going to look a little silly with the way that the game animates it, because unfortunately, due to all the different types of units in the game that can grab a battering ram, we don't actually see them grabbing it and pushing it. Instead, they are standing a little bit behind it, and it just sort of magically pushes itself forward with the unit that's attached to it, which isn't ideal. You know, maybe that's something they could consider addressing in the distant future, but it's hard to say. In any event, I do think that this is overall a good change, though I'll need to wait until I can get my hands on it myself to really have a full opinion on it. I will say the siege attrition note I do find quite interesting. The idea that attrition, so the way siege attrition kind of currently works is that when someone attacks you, you start taking siege attrition immediately, and you basically take the same amount of a siege attrition damage almost every turn. And it's basically just how long does it take for the damage that you're taking to kill you. And it's always, you know, it's kind of a bit under the hood. Like, the game doesn't show you the calculations of how much damage you're going to take, because there are things you can do to affect it. Obviously, there are buildings you can build that lower how much damage you take from siege attrition. Most characters in the game, lords I should say, have a blue skill ability that allows them to increase how much siege attrition damage they deal each turn, or they have an ability that lowers how much siege attrition damage they take when defending. You also have tech tree buffs. You also have certain faction buffs. So there's a lot of systems that go into it. One of the things that, when it comes to the attrition system, that I personally would like to see is a menu that explains what modifiers are active. I personally think that would be a very nice idea, to be able to see, okay, on turn 1 with this new system, like if it's like, okay, on turn 1, you take 5% of your max health as attrition damage, as an example. But then I can mouse over it and it says, okay, the base damage is 5% plus this percentage you're getting because of your tech tree, plus this percentage you're getting because of the skills and talents that your lord has, plus, you know, yada yada yada. And then here's what the enemy has and why theirs is affecting the percentage. That way I can see the final result, and I actually get to see the math that's going into it. I think that would be a really, really, really nice change, and information that players would find valuable. At least I would find valuable. However, it'll be interesting to see how this feels, because the idea that it starts off weak but then gets progressively stronger will overall, as they've said, result in sieges not lasting as long. Because, like, you can get some situations where someone will lay siege to you and the timer before you, like, the siege is automatically over can be like 15 turns or something insane like that, which is definitely too long. Like, you know, you want sieges, depending if you spec into defensive systems to keep you alive, it should be, you know, a good number of turns that gives you potentially the chance to send another army to come help, you know, to break the siege or yada yada yada. But I'm very, very curious to see how this is going to feel. Overall, I'm excited that they're touching on it. I'm just curious what it's going to look and feel like. Defensive adjustments. What we changed. We have adjusted the stats of defensive towers and gates. Towers will now be slightly deadlier, but have a much shorter range, while gates will be more durable when it comes to attacks from regular and some monstrous infantry, but less so against battering rams. Why we changed it. Towers currently feel quite annoying for the attacker when they start shooting immediately after deployment, leaving no room for maneuvers or executing strategic attack plans, while the gates feel like they could be easily breached by mundane infantry, making specialized equipment like the battering rams obsolete. How will these changes affect you in game? These changes will allow you to maneuver outside a settlement you are attacking without being harassed, or open up an opportunity for you to batter it with artillery more easily, while also making the defender less helpless against direct, fast infantry attacks. Okay, overall, I'm very, very excited about this note. I personally have been a very loud advocate for buffing gates, notably. I hate the current system. The idea that a unit of Empire Pistoliers or Chaos Warhounds can like run to the other side of my settlement and just attack the gate, and because of the sheer number of models, they break through it. Like, it takes them a little while, but not a ridiculous amount of time. I have always personally been of the opinion that gates should be impossible to deal damage to, or you should deal like 1 point of damage unless you have the siege attacker trait or you are a specialized unit. So like, if you have a legendary lord that has siege attacker, so they deal bonus damage against buildings, they should be reasonably good at hurting gates. If you have a generic character that has a siege attacker or a specialized equipment against buildings, they should be good at gates. But like all regular infantry, cavalry, like little fast moving creatures, all that stuff, they should be absolute shit against gates. Like, I guess it's fine if they deal like 1 point of damage per attack when the gates have like 14,000 health or whatever. Of like, okay, yeah, if you hit the fast forward button and you just leave those units on the gate, eventually they can get through it, but it should take them like 20 minutes. Like, it should take an obscene amount of time. In my opinion, it should just be impossible. And you should need to rely on things like battering rams and other equipment. And if you attack someone, if you attack a city and you don't have any siege attackers and you don't have any battering rams and you don't have any monstrous units, then frankly, it should be impossible for you to break the gate, because those gates are huge and they should be like actually tanky and good at repelling regular things. Now, I am full for the idea that like, okay, you take battering rams, well, maybe you should have more than one battering ram, because when you send up the first battering ram, if it gets blown up because it's just getting absolutely eviscerated by defensive towers and units on the walls shooting at it, and hopefully one day in the future artillery being on the walls firing at it, well, if it blows up, okay, you could have brought more battering rams, that way you have options. Or you could have more battering rams so you can attack multiple gates simultaneously. Or you could be sending forward, you hold back your battering ram a little bit and you send forward your towers and your missile units to harass things on the walls. Then your battering ram moves up, or you move units with the battering ram to try and body block and protect it from certain kinds of missile fire. Like, making it where there's interaction and there's give and take between the systems. The thing that I hate so much about sieges right now is that they're brain dead. They are super brain dead, and you are generally just like, I'm just gonna click forward. But like, the most efficient thing is to just click forward, make everything climb the walls, you walk in the city from as many directions as possible, and you capture the points and win. And it's just not that fun. Like, I enjoy sieges from time to time by trying to make them fun, but it's not, it should be an innately give and take system as opposed to bending over backwards to try and make it a give and take system against the AI. Like, if you're playing against a human, the current siege system is useless because the attacker tends to have such hilarious significant advantages when it comes to making the walls pointless, making a lot of the defensive systems pointless. But on the flip side, the defender also can have an advantage of they just sit in one spot and wait for you. So I do think that this has a lot of good potential to incentivize the defenders to actually like use the walls, because the walls are actually a deterrent. The walls are difficult to get through. The gate requires effort to get through. So if you're on the ball as the defender, you can put pressure on the attacker, who's most often going to have you outnumbered. And for the attackers, they will need to be clever with how they approach things. In any event, overall, I do think this is a really good change. Once again, we'll have to see it in execution, but the big thing for me, the thing that I would change besides the butt ladders right now without adding anything to the game, I should say, there are a lot of things I'd love to see added. But if I wasn't going to add anything to the game, I would want gates to be borderline immune to damage unless they are being hit by siege attackers, battering rams, artillery, most forms of monstrous infantry, and monstrous beasts, full-on monsters, etc. And then things like dwarf miners, skaven warp grinders, etc. Because it'll just make those things matter. Like when you're building an army comp and you're like, oh, I want this to be my main army that's running around painting the map, you should be making sure that those armies include units that specialize against buildings, because those are the units that are going to be able to run in there and smash stuff up. I think there's also a discussion that will need to be kind of had probably about the effectiveness of like the things you can build inside cities, but we'll see what else we have down here. All right, so we have battle AI improvements. Oh, I will say the idea that the towers don't have not infinite, but close to infinite range anymore, I do think that's a good change. The idea that the attacker will now have room to like maneuver their units without having to always hide in a forest, and they'll be able to like figure out where they want to place things and move things around and get organized without getting shot to hell and back. I think that's a good change. I will note that for me, this feels like another really important moment of that they really need to allow siege weapons to go up on walls. They really need to allow for that, in my opinion, because without allowing artillery on walls, this can result in a situation where as a defender, you're actively punished for having forms of artillery, especially that shoot straight. So like warp lightning cannons, regular cannons, flamethrowers and all that, or flame cannons, all those types of things, you know, things that shoot not in a big arc. Because what you want to encourage, in my opinion, is that if the enemy brings siege equipment or artillery to like blast your towers and your walls and your gates from a distance, that as the defender, if you have artillery, the big advantage to like straight firing artillery would be getting it up on the wall and focus firing enemy artillery, because you have like a tiny bit of a height advantage. So more than likely, you're going to have a slight range and damage advantage, which is going to put you in a good position to hammering those pieces of equipment. The downside, of course, being that you have to actually be like landing the shots that you're firing. Meanwhile, the enemy just has to be pounding away at the wall you're sitting on. And if it deals too much damage, the wall collapses and all of your artillery just immediately dies along with anyone else up there. Which would be, I think, a good system, because the big thing about artillery is that it moves really slowly. So if it takes a hot second to get it up on the wall and then it's firing at people, and it takes it a good hot second to get down off the wall, if it even can get down off the wall, because personally, I would be perfectly fine with it being like a one-way trip. Like, hey, if you want to deploy your artillery on the wall, you can, and it'll like keep firing. But if you put it up on the wall, like there's no way for it to get down. Like the artillery piece is stuck up there because it took so much effort to get it up there, and there's just no realistic way in the midst of a battle to pull it down off the walls. Like, you know, you could still have the crew drop it. Like the crew can drop the artillery pieces and run off the walls before they collapse if you want to keep them around to help with the defense. But I think that would just, once again, add an interesting set of decisions you have to make. But I'd also be fine with just allowing them to move up and off the walls, as long as, you know, it was maybe took a little effort or took a little time for them to make the transition to being on the regular ground versus up on the wall. Battle AI improvements. What we've changed. We can't just remove pocket ladders without teaching the battle AI how to play without them. So for these proving grounds, we have fixed over 50 issues relating to how the battle AI plays or reacts to certain situations, both on the attacking and defending side in sieges. As some of those are not completely related to the pocket ladders, these changes will be present even if the pocket ladders are turned on from the options menu. Why we changed it. Battle AI has always been tricky to get right, but that is most obvious in siege battles, and we are really trying to make it play better and react to the player's actions in a more realistic way. We are not saying that we have fixed the battle AI, but hopefully with these improvements, it will behave a lot more convincingly and will offer a more interesting challenge. How will these changes affect you in game? These changes will offer less weird behavior from the AI during sieges, and allow it to be able to play the game without the use of pocket ladders. Obviously, that's a pretty significant change. The AI will expect to have battle ladders as a functioning system. So for them to like get into settlements and attack them, and also to react to people climbing the walls with said ladders. So having to teach the AI how to deal with that no longer being a thing is a pretty significant change. It also kind of surprises me a bit that the beta even has the option to turn ladders back on, because I feel like they probably had to do a lot of extra work to make sure the AI doesn't just not know how to deal with ladders. Like instead of just changing it, they had to add to it in addition to improving what was already there. Once again, personally, I'm on team ladders should go bye-bye unless they get transitioned into an actual buildable piece of siege equipment that you have to attach to units, which would make them like way slower, and yada yada, but you know, whatever. Obviously that's super duper good. I'm really excited to see this. The AI, of course, is rather notorious in siege settlements. The big thing for me isn't really necessarily like how the AI reacts to what I'm doing. I'm more concerned, I think, with pathfinding than anything else. Like when I think about sieges, the biggest frustrations to me personally in sieges is how the actual models of the unit, so not like how the AI is issuing orders, but how the actual little models in each unit are behaving when I issue orders. Like when I'm trying to tell them to go into the city and they're not taking like the shortest pathway, right? Like I'm trying to get them to move through a hole in a wall or through the gate that's been smashed open, and they're like, nope, I'm gonna go climb this wall over here, or nope, I'm gonna go in this other way. And it's like, no, do what I fucking told you to do. Or one thing that I notice a lot in sieges is that units tend to get like torn apart. And it's mostly, honestly, I blame this almost exclusively on the ladders. I think the ladders are by far the biggest culprit of this, where units, because they're all climbing the ladders one by one, they get like really stretched out, and it results in this situation where like a unit will be in a settlement, but like part of the unit is all grouped together in like one place, but then it's like stretched out across the rest of the settlement. So when you're trying to like issue an order to that unit, it tries to follow it, but because all the guys are scattered, it has a really hard time reacting to what you're doing. Or even better, and by better I mean worse, is when the enemy units are really stretched out and you try to attack them, like the technical core of the unit where your unit has to attack them will be like in a completely different part of the map from where most of their models are, which leads to a bunch of super awkward situations. Or like you'll have an enemy unit that's like capturing a location and you try to attack them with a cavalry or monster unit, but it turns out that like the core member of the unit that counts as the center is still stuck on a wall somewhere, so you can't attack them without having to like just move into them. And it's just so dumb. It's so dumb. So I really hope that when they're talking about the battle AI, they're mostly talking about pathfinding, because that's what I personally care far more about. Siege map improvements. What we've changed. With this update, we're also starting an initiative of reworking old siege maps to make them play and feel better. For now, we have done only 3. One for Skaven, Empire, and Orcs. But there will be more to come in the future after getting your feedback on them. Why we changed it. Siege maps can often feel a little too cramped, with little space to maneuver both inside and outside the settlements. With our reworks, we are looking to open up those spaces a bit, allowing more approaches to the victory points, as well as wider spaces for larger forces to engage one another. All right, so that one's kind of interesting. I mean, I suppose it depends on what maps specifically we're talking about, because like some of the Warhammer 3 maps I tend to find have some pretty okay like places where the city will like open up and there's enough space for like there to be several units colliding all at once, and there's like numerous paths to most of the victory points like 4 or more that allow you to get around. But I could definitely see this being the case with older maps, like maps from Warhammer 1 and 2, because obviously the siege system in Warhammer 1 and 2 is very, very different. So in Warhammer 3, they kind of had to rush out a lot of maps. I will say I do hope this is also an opportunity for them to make some slightly unique maps. Because, like, I don't necessarily need every single siege map to be, like, absolutely fucking meticulously crazy. But it would be really cool to see some of the, like, quote-unquote capital maps be given some, like, special designs with, like, larger opening areas. Because, like, most of my major settlements, I probably am not going to have enough of a force there for it to really matter for me to have, like, gigantic space, right? To make use of tons of units and all that jazz. But, like, for Skaven, if I'm fighting at Hell Pit or if I'm fighting at Skaven Blight, well, okay, those are really significant cities that I'm going to have gigantic garrisons and I'm going to be hell bent on defending them. And, you know, those are the capitals of my empire. So those are places where I would really want to have significant, huge maps that allow me to engage in larger conflicts throughout the city, while also having more pathways to, like, maneuver, because I'm more than likely going to be dealing with large amounts of troops, right? The same thing for, like, the Empire of, I'm not really worried about, like, the capital of Ostermark, right? Like, that's not where I'm going to be putting down my significant throwdowns. I'm not worried about Hergig, but I would really like Altdorf and Nuln and Middenheim to all have, like, really big, slightly unique, fancy maps. Like Middenheim to have statues of Ulrich and wolves, and it's, like, snowing most of the time, and it's more wintry, and it's, like, really cool. Meanwhile, Altdorf has, like, maybe some cool little special locations referenced in it. Nuln has got, like, a slightly unique design, is more like gunpowdery with, just things to make those places feel unique and fun. Who's the other one they said? Greenskins? Siege maps? Orcs, so Greenskins. For Greenskins, the biggest ones for me would probably be, like, Carrick 8 Peaks, I think technically is a Greenskin settlement. So for me, if it could be, like, Carrick 8 Peaks or Black Crag, those would probably be the two biggest ones. But I'd also see, like, well, okay, if I had to do a list for Greenskins, it'd be, like, Massive Oracle, Black Crag, and Carrick 8 Peaks would probably be, like, the 3 big ones that I'd really love to see have unique, cooler special maps. Like, it doesn't need to be insane, but just making those maps designed so they're meant to be played with larger armies. You know, those are the ones where you're like, oh yeah, I've got, like, 40 units on defense and 40 plus, 60 units attacking, because these are giant battles that they feel appropriate for that many units running around. But, like, I'm not worried about, like, fucking Mount Gunbad necessarily. I'm not worried about Ekrund. Which, once again, this reminds me I need to bug CA about. They need to rename Ekrund to Mount Bloodhorn, or they need to make Mount Bloodhorn a landmark, but it should really be Mount Bloodhorn. And then they also need to change Red Eye Mountain to be called Red Eye Mountain again, which I got fixed in Warhammer 2, and then they forgot to fix it in Warhammer 3, and they still haven't done it yet. Anyway, what's cooking is the final segment. Everything we've listed here are just the first steps for us to get sieges where we... first steps. Okay, good. So this is just phase 1. Everything we've listed here are just the first steps for us to get sieges where we want them to be, and we are looking at this as a long-lasting effort to improve the game. In the future, we have a wish list of possible options to explore, such as introducing ladders as a new constructible siege equipment. I think that would be a great idea. Rebalancing the way garrisons work and what units are available to them for all factions. That would be so fucking cool. Garrisons right now are so boring because you have so little control over them, and it sucks because, like, everybody wants the garrisons to be, like, faction fancy. or at least have the ability to have some control over what units are in them, so you can customize it to your playstyle. Man, that would be super cool. Changing the way the building of towers or barricades work, as well as more battle AI and pathfinding updates. Okay, great. So they're at least thinking about it. Towers and barricades, yeah, that's a tricky one. Towers and barricades, I feel like, will always be a fairly controversial, not controversial as in like bad, but like controversial as in it has a lot of differing opinions. Of like, is it better to make it where you can only build them at the start of the fight? Is it better, or is that bad? Because then, like, if you're the player, all you have to do is wait to see where the AI is going to build stuff, and you just ignore it and go to the other side of the city, which makes it kind of pointless. So shouldn't you be able to build defenses during the battle so that you're able to more accurately respond to what the attacker is doing? But that can also be very annoying for attackers, because like they're trying to like plan out their path and there's stuff being thrown up in their way. But also, like, some of the things don't work that well. For instance, like, the barricades probably need to be made more powerful and actually have more reasonable abilities. Because, like, right now you throw up a barricade and the AI or whatever just walks up to it and just punches it a bunch till it falls over. Like, maybe they should have significantly more health, or be made to be like gates where if you don't have anti-building properties to your damage, like, they're very, very difficult to damage. Or maybe they should cause like melee damage reflection, so you can attack them to knock them down, but if you do that, you take damage. Making things interesting. And then last but not least, we understand that sometimes a lot of us want to just keep painting the campaign map in our chosen color and not waste time with sieges or battles in general. So we are already hard at work at polishing out, with the heavy use of hammers and axes, that auto resolver and making it function properly. I think that's reasonable. I personally, I will usually hit a point in every campaign I play where like I've played a lot of battles, but I'm like really, I'm around like turn 100 or turn 120 or whatever, and I'm like, I've played enough that I'm ready to go to my next campaign, but I want to finish this one first. And the victory achievement I need is like the stupid one where it's like, oh, destroy 60 or occupy 60 settlements, which is not thematic or interesting or immersive at all, and it's just gonna dumb and I hate it, but it's just what we have at the moment. So I'm like, okay, I just want to auto resolve everything so I can just finish this campaign and move on to the next one. And also, obviously, I think for a lot of people, some people don't enjoy certain kinds of battles. Like, even if they made siege battles really, really fun, like if they made siege battles like the best thing ever, there would still be people who would hate them, because siege battles, in my opinion, should be more meticulous and slower than regular battles, right? They should not allow for the same tactics you use in open field battles to be used nearly the same. Like, you should have a unique style when you're playing siege battles to deal with the unique challenges offered by siege battles. But that will mean that there will be people who just don't want to play siege battles because it forces them to play in a way they don't have fun with. So you need to make the auto resolve fair, right? I don't think it's necessarily that the auto resolve needs to be easy. It's just it needs to be fair. I should auto resolve, and there shouldn't be like one type of unit in my faction that just gets randomly sniped every time I auto resolve for some fucking reason. And the way that the auto resolve weighs certain units versus others needs to be rebalanced every once in a blue moon. Obviously right now it's not in the best place, so taking another look at it, because like ideally we should get to the point where all of the units in the game have an appropriate auto resolve modifier. And once they've done that, they shouldn't need to mess with it that much outside of like when new content gets added to the game, or there's like a major rebalancing of how a unit acts. In which case, okay, yeah, I could use a little tweak in the auto resolve, ideally. So anyway, that's it for this article. I am very, very excited for the Twitch stream tomorrow. That's being done by good old Mr. Vasilev himself. I believe I will be streaming it myself, because I don't know if we're actually going to have early access to this or not. But either way, I intend to watch it live so that I can see what the hell they're up to. I think that can make for a fun thing. We can just have a fun chat. So hopefully y'all will consider joining me. That would be tomorrow at, oh gosh, it'll be tomorrow at 9:30 p.m. CST. I think it'd be a really good time. But in any event, that is everything for today. And I will talk to you guys soon. Thanks for watching.